Okay, we're continuing with quotes from the Holy Grail of Wisdom quotes by me, Pete Rogers, in alphabetical order. Francois Rabelais. He was a French Catholic priest, a writer of satire, wrote a famous book called Gargantua and Pantagruel. He was a big admirer of Erasmus. This was the time of the Reformation, Protestant Reformation, Catholic Counter-Reformation. He says, debts and lies are generally mixed together. Science without conscience leads to utter ruin. So much is a man worth as he esteems himself. I like that one because basically I think you have to be kind of conceited, elitist, and stuck up if you're going to survive in a competitive environment. Because there's always people trying to smack you down, trying to, whip you with their displeasure, as Ralph Waldo Emerson said, if you don't conform. But if you don't, you have to not be conformist to do anything interesting or useful. To conform just means to go with the flow, which means to not do anything. So it's automatic. If you're doing something good, that means you're improving things. That means you're changing things. And that means you're in trouble and people are pissed off at you. There's no way around it. So you have to be kind of strong and say, hey, F you. What I'm saying is the truth and it's right. And if you don't like it, go shove it up your ass. You have to be that way. There's no other way around it. I've been in the situation countless times and I can tell you there's no smooth way to do it. Now, don't get me wrong. Some people are smarter and better at it than I am. Like Caldwell Esselstyn is a great example of a guy who kept himself so likable, okay? But I think it's also because he stuck to a narrow thing. Just low-fat diet prevents atherosclerosis. That's how it is, and he proved it. That's great. But, I'm more like McDougal in being a polymath jack of all trades. So I'm into a whole bunch of different things. So I can't just do one thing and sit tight, like Caldwell Esselstyn or T. Colin Campbell or something. No, I'm in the middle of 10 different things. And like McDougal said, you have to criticize the status quo because the average patient thinks the status quo is good and it's going to work. And unless they realize that the status quo is bogus, they won't be willing to try anything else. So they need to know the truth about it. And even once they know the truth, they usually won't do anything. But at least you give them a chance. Okay, continuing with Francois Rabelais. To be educated, one must study the ancient Greeks. Yeah, if you don't know the ancient Greeks, you're an ignoramus. It's just a fact. There's three great golden ages of creative intellectual achievement in history. Number one is the ancient Greeks. Number two is the Italian Renaissance. And number three is Europe in the 1800s. Those are the golden ages of intellectual achievement in what you would call literature, art, humanities, thinking, painting. Those are the great times. Now, don't get me wrong. There's been other so-called scientific revolution. There was the Industrial Revolution that moved us from outdoors to indoors with the production of all these metal machines and later on electricity, okay? There was the revolution in physics, if you will, in modern physics, in the early 1900s. So there's been plenty of other sort of local scientific revolutions. But in terms of big cultural stuff, so as Ayn Rand had said, the 1800s were light years ahead of the 1900s in terms of cultural achievements in literature. World War I was sort of the suicide attempt of Europe, and after that, people said things like it was the end of all that in terms of man had sort of lost his hope of greatness and individual achievement after World War I. It was a disaster for the mind of Western man. Okay, all those post-World War I writers are kind of a bunch of idiots, in my opinion, alcoholics and screw-ups in other ways. Okay, let us continue with Francois Rabelais. His next quote, those who have not studied the ancient Greek writers should not be called educated. How do you know antiquity was foolish? How do you know the present is wise? Yeah, a lot of people just assume the modern world is intelligent compared to the past, but that's not true. A doctor would have better luck nowadays treating patients with phlebotomy than they would with these drugs. Okay, phlebotomy is a pretty useful treatment for atherosclerosis and hypertension. Okay, Francois Rabelais. Gestures in love are more attractive and effective than words. Okay, next, Jean-Baptiste Racine from 1639 to 1699. He was a French playwright. He said, the face of tyranny is always mild at first. It's kind of like Machiavelli said. He says, a tyrant doesn't have to change things altogether. All they have to do is keep the old name even, but change what it does. So as long as people have the semblance of liberty and freedom. They're happy without necessarily having it. Like Octavian said in ancient Rome, he would let the aristocrats keep their titles, but took the power out of them. Okay, Jean Racine, I can hear those glances that you think are silent. Yeah, a woman talks with her face. That's why on a telephone call, the woman has an advantage over the man because he can't really tell what she's saying, whereas she can tell. A man's voice says everything, whereas a woman, half her conversations is in her little facial expressions. Okay, extreme justice is injustice. Yeah, people who go by the letter of the law rather than the spirit of the law, as Jesus Christo said. A noble heart cannot suspect in others the pettiness and malice that it has never felt. Yes. That's why a lot of times the good people get chumped. The feeling of mistrust is always the last which a great mind acquires. Yes. A lot of times somebody's trying to do something good and noble, and they're undercut by a lot of people who don't have those same values. Jean Racine. The quarrels of lovers are the renewal of love. Yeah, for that one, I'd say women want a drama in a relationship. A guy doesn't need drama. He's like, yeah, I'm perfectly fine if today is like yesterday and 100 days before that, okay? Let's just have a nice quiet night. A woman wants some drama. So she's going to stir up a fuss. She might be on her period or something, but a woman's going like this. Whereas a man's pretty much like this. Every time you see a woman, you have to look at her eyes, see her mood. Is she in a good mood towards you or a bad mood towards you? And if she's in a good mood towards you, you can talk openly. If she's in a bad mood towards you, you better be quiet and let her talk first, see where she's coming from. Okay, if you look at the brain of a man versus a woman on MRI, midline sagittal MRI, the only difference that's discernible is you can see the woman's got this big pituitary with a convex upward surface. Okay, it's about twice the size of a man's pituitary because she's got her menstrual cycle, so she's got a lot of hormones. And she goes by emotion a lot more than a guy does. That's why her personality can vary somewhat from day to day, especially compared to a guy, especially compared when she's on her period. Okay, the quarrels of lovers are the renewal of love. The principal rule of art is to please and to move. All the other rules were created for this first one. Yeah, well, I would also say that's just for art, to please and to move. But, if you're going to write about nonfiction science, it's also to inform, ideally with those other things in a pleasant, emotional way, because emotional makes it memorable. Okay, Santiago Ramon y Cajal. He's a guy who was studying neurology, the anatomy of the nerves in the brain. Okay, and here's his first quote. In the study of the retina, for the first time I felt my faith in Darwinism and natural selection to be weakened. I was amazed by the supreme genius of the retina and the visual apparatus in vertebrates, as well as in the eye of the simplest insect. I felt more profoundly than in any other subject of study the shuddering sensation of the unfathomable mystery of life. Yeah, the more you know about biology, biochemistry, anatomy, physiology, the more you believe in God. Because it's too incredible, okay? The human brain has 100 billion neurons, and they all know how to connect to each other and make meaningful thought and store memories. It's amazing. It's a miracle, okay? The smartest 1,000 humans on Earth scientists, if you put them all together, they couldn't make a human brain. They can't make a plant, okay? Their brain capacity is nothing compared to God's to make life on Earth, okay? To make complex life, multicellular life. Please, okay? The intermitochondrial membrane is a nuclear power plant that splits the atom hydrogen into its electron and its proton, runs the electron down through the gradient of electron transport, pumps the protons into the intermembranous space, harvests them to produce ATP. You can have hundreds of thousands of mitochondria in one little tiny cell. It's a miracle that could be done. Okay, here's this next thing. He basically, drawing with a small thin line ink pen, mapped out the anatomy of all these neurons and how they connect, and it was rather miraculous to see that for the first time. He said, every great work of scientific achievement is the fruit of patience, perseverance, and concentration during months and years upon one specific subject. He who wants to discover a new truth must be capable of the strictest abstinence and renunciation. The ideal case would be that of a scientist who during this period of mental incubation would pay no heed to any thought that is extraneous to his problem. If he possesses this capacity to remain incessantly absorbed by one subject, he will be able to multiply his strength. Yeah, by intensely focusing on one thing, you get way better at it. And if you look at the guys who solved incredible problems, that's what they'll typically say. I was obsessed about this problem for days, months, for years. Isaac Newton, that's what he said. Okay, the next one is Cajal Rana. We'll just briefly do him. He's a guy, he does a lot of stuff. He has a website. I forget the name of his website, but he talks about a lot of the miracles of biology and biochemistry. Basically, he's another one of these guys, biochemist, who the more he studies it, the more he believes in God, and he writes about that. For example, even in mitochondria, which were originally thought to be an aerobic bacterium, they were ingested by an anaerobic bacteria. That's a very unlikely event. It's thought to have only occurred once in the history of the world that it survived. And there's no reason that these original mitochondria would give their ATP to the cell that ate them. No structure is going to give its most valuable thing, its ATP, to like another animal that ate it. No way. So that's one of the reasons why a lot of scientists believe that mitochondria were designed by God. Okay. So anyways, hope you found that helpful.